Hello everyone and welcome to week 14 of English 200, 201, and 202. This week we're going to be moving on for just 1 week. We're going to learn the genre of plays. We're going to read in our book Destination Plays, just a page and a half about the genre of plays and how it's different from writing short fiction and from writing poetry. Then I'd like you to read chapter 11 on action and dialogue. This is something that can overlap between fiction and short plays. And then for an example text, I'd like you to look at Men's Intuition, found on pages 438 to 445. Before we get going on this week's assignment, though, I do want to talk about our final assignment, and that is a portfolio assignment. It's not due for a couple weeks, but everyone in this class should start thinking about which pieces you want to revise and get to be their best for your portfolio. In English 200, all you're required to have is a cover, and that's important. And one way to think about a cover is it's like the cover of your book, right? And so it tells the reader something when they see it. And then a title for your collection, which is really important as well. It's your first chance to really, put the reader in a mood and help them feel something from your work. Then you're going to write an introduction that's 500 words long. That means about 2 pages long. And in it, I'd like you to talk about why you selected the work that you chose, and then how you went about revising the writing. And then also how you've grown as a writer over the course of the semester and possibly what you want to do next. There are, if you're in English 200, you can take English 201 and English 202, and you can take it in the summer or you can take it next fall. And the great news is next fall it will be in person on Mondays and Wednesdays. I believe it's from 12:30 to 1:45. All right. If you're in English 201 or 202, your portfolio is a little more extensive. You'll have a cover and a title just like the other ones, and you'll also write an introduction, but your introduction is going to be 1,000 words long. That's at least 4 pages long. And I want you to talk about the work as a whole. And I want to hear about your growth as a writer over the course of the semester, but also over the course of your experience as a writer. You need to have at least 6 to 8 pieces representative of one genre. It can be poetry, it can be fiction, or it can be creative nonfiction. You may also include 1 or 2 pieces from another genre if you feel like you'd like them to be included in the portfolio. Like I said, this is just an introduction to the assignment, so you can start thinking about which pieces you might want to include. And if you notice that the pieces you want to work on have not yet gotten comments back from me, you can shoot me an email and I will prioritize giving you feedback on those pieces. Okay? So this week we're going to be talking about drama. The text of a story in drama is called a script. And action and dialogue are basically the basis of all narrative, but they're really, really important in drama. And whenever you write drama, you always want to think about the performance. That's always part of the purpose of the writing. So in order to understand drama, we want to go back to Aristotle's Poetics. Aristotle wrote a really important piece of writing about the idea of how to write, and he covered a lot of the parts of writing that we have been focusing on throughout the semester. So for example, character. His idea of character was that a character must compel the audience's attention. What's important is what a character does, his needs, his problems, or action. Action is the plot, and it's the arrangement of actions designed to tell the story of the plot. And it depends on tension and suspense. Actions must cause reactions. Thoughts or ideas. The play's theme as depicted through the actions of the characters. Language, diction, and verbal expression is what is spoken on stage by the actors in a play. Good dialogue tells the audience what it needs to know, the time period, background, setting, and style of a play. Good dialogue is action-orientated, and exposition, what has happened, action, what is happening, and promise, what may happen. Music or song, don't forget everything you learned at the beginning of the semester when it comes to sound, even when you're writing dialogue for a play. Spectacle, image, or visual adornment, this is what happens on stage, big or small. The costumes, the props, and you should be thinking about this when you're writing your play. Here's some questions to ask about your play. Is each character in your play justified? Is it important? Is there a driving force or compelling desire that moves your play forward? Does your play bring deeper inner psychological conflicts to the surface in speech or action? Have you kept your setting and character descriptions to the crucial aspects? Does your play have a clear beginning, middle, and end? Have you started your play in medias res, in the middle of things? Have you included appropriate stage directions? Could your play be performed? Does dialogue both illuminate your characters and move the plot forward? Does it provide any necessary background without forcing the character to sound as though he or she is explaining to the audience? Have you used appropriate formatting for your play? So, speaking of formatting, here is how you need to format your play. It's a little different than how we've formatted poems or short stories, and you can get detailed information on what your play should look like on the page, on page 544 to 547 in Serious Daring. So you'll begin by putting the word setting, and then you'll explain where your play is set in space and time. This is just a note for the reader. And then at rise is what the characters are actually doing when the lights come up. Where are they on the stage? What are they doing? Then you'll replace the word character 1 with the name of the character, and then you'll put the dialogue. Anytime you want to put stage directions, they'll go in italics and parentheses like this. There's several different types of dialogue that you can use in a play. You can use direct dialogue, and that comes closest to reproducing an actual conversation, and it takes up a lot of space on the page. It emphasizes the nuances of how a character expresses herself. Indirect dialogue is written like summary. However, it rises to a higher level of specificity. It applies to a specific conversation and can be merged with direct dialogue. And then there's summarized dialogue, and that doesn't go into great detail. It's used when it's important how a character learns something, but not the exact words that were said. And it moves very, very quickly. So we're going to just start off by writing a scene. This is called the invisible scene, and the idea is to intersperse dialogue with action, okay? What I'd like you to do is to write a scene in which a character's body, as well as his or her mind, is engaged in doing something, like stage business, okay? That means the character's doing something on the stage when he or she is speaking. Here's some possible things that the character could be doing, but you can choose something else. Repairing something, playing solitaire, a game involving other players, doing exercises, painting a canvas or a wall, cutting down a tree, giving someone a haircut. You can come up with your own suggestions, though, but I want you to explore how various activities and settings can change what happens in a scene. For example, what happens when characters are planning their honeymoon, if they're painting an apartment, or one of them is cutting the other's hair? Or what happens when characters are having a confrontation in public, say in some fancy restaurant, rather than in the privacy of their home? It's also instructive to analyze how a writer you might admire handles the interweaving of dialogue and body language. Go through one of your favorite stories and highlight all of the body language and choreography. I guarantee that if you do that, it's going to teach you something. Shirley Jackson famously said that if a character's going to do something in a story, like going to say something or going to do something, it has to move the plot forward. And so I want you to think about that when you're writing the dialogue for your scene, okay? So the objective of this is to give concrete life to the scenes our characters inhabit, and to understand how action and choreography relate to the objects in the scene, and how all of these relate to and help share dialogue and the engagement of the characters. So for your invisible scene, I'd like you to write 2 pages long and just try to sketch out this scene. And like I said, you can choose any other activity. It has to be an activity that the character is actually doing. Okay, here's another one. I'd like you to use dialogue to do something that's a little more subtle. So write a dialogue between 2 people who know each other, each taking the opposite side of an issue or problem. This should be a verbal dance, not a shouting match. So don't depict like a big fight. The issue you choose should be something immediate and particular, like whether to spend money on a vacation or put it in a savings account, rather than abstract. Communism is going down the tubes, right? Or capitalism is taking over our country. That's not going to be a good one. Keep it simple and emotionally close to the 2 people involved. The speakers should be equally convincing. That is, you, the author, can't load the argument on one side or the other. Make each person distinctive in her oral style, for example, in vocabulary and tone. Keep in mind that the subtext, what the conversation reveals about the speaker's relationship to each other, is the most important thing. That's what the text should be communicating. For example, in the what shall we do with the money conversation, the subtext is about which of the 2 speakers has more power and is willing to exploit it. So I want you to do this, though, in just 500 words. And the reason why we're doing this is to learn to use dialogue to reveal character and human dynamics, and to understand that the speaking style says as much about a person as her behavior does. Incidentally, you should also recognize that dialogue should not be used for the following. Okay, it shouldn't be used for lengthy exposition or to furnish your stage, as a substitute for action, and as a vehicle for showing off your own vocabulary and education. A false line of dialogue can ruin an entire scene. Okay, so 500 words for that one. All right, the next one is I want you to brainstorm an idea for a 1-act play. Once you have an idea, I want you to do an outline for a scene for a 10-minute play. You're going to outline what you'll do page by page beforehand, and it can help you manage the structure of this form. Structure a beginning where you introduce your characters, including the main character's desire, what the main characters want. A middle where you bring the characters into conflict and begin a series of complications or raise stakes. And an end where you resolve your story, happily, sadly, violently, or anticlimactically. All right, and your final assignment this week is you're going to actually write a 1-act play. So you can develop your outline into a 1-act play, or you can use one of the previous examples to create a play from. But your play should be at least 4 pages long, and you need to focus on dialogue and action. Dialogue and action. Make sure all your characters have some desire and that they all have a purpose. And go back through this checklist at the beginning of the lecture, questions to ask about your play. Go through this after you finish writing your play. All right, guys, that's it for this week. I look forward to seeing you online. Remember that I have office hours on Tuesday, Thursdays from 11 to 12:30 and from 1:30 to 3.